America's two great pastimes collide on this podcast. It is baseball and making money. From the dog days of summer through the October Classic, Greg Bases Peterson's going to be free swinging at the betting board as he tries to hit a grand slam for your bankroll. Now here is GP.
Happy Sunday, everyone. Welcome into MLB Overtime Betting. Greg Peterson broadcasting from the Azuñia Tequila Studios out here in beautiful Las Vegas. We've got a nice show for you planned out today as Matt Snyder of CBS's MLB coverage is going to be joining me in the second segment. That's going to be a little bit of fun. We're going to recap all of these scores from Saturday as well, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a glimpse into the Twitter mailbag as well. We're going to be doing that in the first segment, and to wrap things up, we're going to be giving you a side and total on every game on the Sunday betting board and a little something I like to call Touch 'em All. Please note that there's going to be a game or two I may not be able to go quite in depth on because there's going to be some pitching announcements and changes, and that causes games to be off the board. But I did first get a little bit of a question here from the Twitter mailbag, so let's get into it.
So you have questions, and Greg may or may not have any insight into them, but let's dive into the Twitter mailbag.
The question was why I lock in some of my plays and why I hold off on others, and it's a combination of two different things. One is sometimes there's going to be lineup changes, injury information, and you need to note that because unlike with college basketball and baseball, typically you have like righty versus lefty matchups and everything like that. You've got so many different variables with that, and that causes for platoon players to sometimes be in and out, and that could sometimes adjust the way that I look at a total or just the way that I look at a side. And sometimes you just find out that there's going to be a couple bullpen guys that are going to be available, not available, because as I went in depth on the podcast yesterday, evaluating bullpens is one of the most important things that you can do when handicapping baseball, so that is always paramount. And then there's always just line moves in general. Sometimes there's a situation where I am on, like, say, an underdog like the Arizona Diamondbacks, just spitballing an example, and I see them at, like, plus 185, but I see that the Dodgers are continuing to get steamed. Why take the plus 185? Why not wait to maximize that value if you think it's going to get to $2, if you think it's going to go even higher than that? Trying to get the best possible number is why I do this situation where I lock in some of my plays and I leave others sort of hanging out there in the balance and trying to get the best numbers possible. And I'm also shopping around trying to be able to maximize my value because why take $1.85 when you can get $2? That's what I always say, but if you ever have any questions for the podcast, much like that one, always feel free to tweet them in at unit_81. Obviously, this is a new podcast. This is my first week of doing the baseball podcast, so more than happy to answer any sports betting questions that you have, any baseball questions. I really want to be able to get into those, give you guys a little bit of intel. Since we are so early in the season, I feel like it could be a good booster to not just your knowledge of baseball handicapping, but also your bankroll. But now let's get into those results from Saturday.
What happened yesterday? Let's go around the bases and find out.
If you took a shot on the Baltimore Orioles, well, congratulations. You made a very big killing as the Baltimore Orioles knock off the Yankees by a count of 5-3. In this one, the Yankees left 11 men on base, and you got to give the Baltimore Orioles a little bit of credit as Jonathan Sucre was able to come up with a 3-for-4 day. He had 3 RBIs. They did sort of the opener in this situation as Jacob Yacobonis was able to come in for 3 innings after they had their starter, Nate Carnes, go for 2, and the Orioles actually did a decent job of being able to strand men on base. Needless to say, I don't think we're going to see it too often from this Orioles team this year, but they were able to get a win. The Mets pounded the tar out of the Nationals 11-8. In this game, it was Noah Syndergaard going up against Steven Strasburg. You didn't quite expect to see this many hits, and the Mets didn't even go for any home runs in this game. It was all little dink shots and things like that. Victor Robles was able to hit home run for the Nationals, who, oh, by the way, came up with 4 runs in the 9th inning. That speaks to my point from a few days ago about the Mets not necessarily having the best bullpen, but I thought that was very interesting, and now the Mets start out 2-0. The Cleveland Indians, who are badly banged up, they were able to knock off the Minnesota Twins by a count of 2-1. How about the performance that Trevor Bauer was able to give to the Cleveland Indians? They needed a quality start, and they got one from him. He went 7 innings with just 1 hit allowed. that one hit was an earned run as Nelson Cruz was able to drive in a run for the Minnesota Twins. But with that said, the Indians, as long as they could tread water without Lindor and company in the lineup, they'll be just fine. The Royals were able to knock off the White Sox 8-6. Neither of these teams have any good pitching whatsoever, though we are seeing some good pitching from both the Tigers and the Toronto Blue Jays, or perhaps just a lack of offense, as the Blue Jays were able to completely blank the Tigers by a count of 3-0. Ken Giles was able to actually get a save. Spencer Turnbull took a loss. No surprise there. Perhaps this is the turning around of Aaron Sanchez. We all recall a couple years ago he was a 15-win pitcher. He went 5 strong in this one. He had 3 walks, but he was able to fan 6, gave up only 3 hits, so a very quality start there. The Phillies just continue their offensive ways. Their bullpen obviously has a couple issues, but they were able to knock off the Braves by a count of 8-6. The Braves are right now dealing with injuries to Michael Fultonavich and also Kevin Gausman, so right now they've been trotting out there just a hodgepodge of pitchers. Bryce Wilson made his first career start, and he got roughed up as he went 3.1 innings and gave up 4 runs in that one. And then coming on in relief for him, this guy also gave up 2 runs in Wes Persons. This is just not a good Atlanta Braves pitching staff right now. They really need to get their arms healthy. And then for the Phillies, Bryce Harper was able to get his first home run in the city of Philadelphia. He was able to quiet some of those boo birds, as also being able to go deep for this team. How about a guy that I feel like goes a little bit under the radar because he bats 8th in the lineup? He might be the best number 8 hitter out there in the bigs, and Maikel Franco. He now has 2 home runs. He was able to go deep in this one. Phillies were able to get the job done 8-6. Milwaukee Brewers were able to get past the St. Louis Cardinals by a count of 4-2, but Paul Goldschmidt continues to look very impressive for the St. Louis Cardinals. You do need to take note of him. The Tampa Bay Hotshell Rays get their second straight win as they were able to knock off the Houston Astros by a count of 3-1. Taylor Glasnow, a guy that I haven't been necessarily too high on, actually had a good outing. He gave up a home run early to Alex Bregman, but from there, the Tampa Bay Rays were able to get the job done with their bullpen. Glasnow went 5 innings, only had 77 pitches. He gave up 6 hits, 1 run, which I mentioned earlier, and then Stanek was able to come in, get a hold, and then Jose Alvarado did a nice job of being able to close this game out. And I do feel like the Tampa Bay Rays, once again, has one of the best bullpens out there in the bigs. You have to take note of that. And the Astros, they seem to have taken a little bit of a step back with their pitching, to say the least. The Rangers were able to shellac the Cubs by a count of 8-6. This is a game in which we saw a lot of steam on the under because the wind was blowing out, but this is why you can't take unders with bad pitchers. Yu Darvish went 2.2 innings for 3 runs. And then on the other end, you had our good friend Edison Volquez go 4 innings, 4 earned runs in that one. Neither of these teams really put on a pitching clinic in this one. I think we'll see a little bit of a better showing when it's Cole Hamels and Lance Lynn taking the mound on Sunday. But with that said, I thought that was interesting. The Mariners nearly blew their second straight save, but they were able to get the win over the Boston Red Sox 6-5. They entered the 9th inning up 6-2, and then things got a little bit hairy for the Seattle Mariners as in this one, they had Zach Rosscup give up 3 runs. He had been solid last year. I wouldn't consider him necessarily a guy I would stick my chips in the middle with. But with that said, last year he was with the Dodgers. He was 0-1 with a 4.6 ERA. He made 17 different appearances, and he was a pretty good strikeout guy. He had 20 strikeouts in 11.1 innings. But with that said, not necessarily a good way to start off the year. But how about the Mariners now being 4-1? Jay Bruce was able to get off the schneid. He was able to have 3 RBIs. He had a home run in this one. He had 2 on with that one. Mitch Haniger is right now batting .273 for this squad. Edwin Encarnacion hasn't necessarily gotten going, but Tim Beckham right now batting .474 with a pair of home runs himself. He has been absolutely impressive. And Ryan Healy doing a great job as well. The Seattle Mariners might be a little bit of a surprise team. The A's are continuing to do what they did last year. They get a 4-2 win over the LA Angels, as the Angels in this one, they just didn't necessarily have the best starting pitching, as they had Pena going for them. He's just not a guy that you really want to be betting on too much this year. But a team that you want to be betting on, how about the LA Dodgers? 18 runs against the Arizona Diamondbacks as Jock Peterson went yard, Austin Barnes went yard, Cody Bellinger had 2 home runs as well, and Justin Turner chipped in 5 RBIs. This LA Dodgers team is smoking hot. Kenta Maeda, he gave up 3 runs in 6.2 innings, but it really didn't matter as they were able to get just such an easy win. And Zach Godley, he really ended the year ice cold last year, and man, things are not looking good for them. And then how about the San Francisco Giants? They were able to get their first win of the year. And this is a situation where you got to take a look at a Giants team that I don't think is going to be very good, but they do have one pitcher that I really want to back, and he was able to get the win in this one in Derek Rodriguez. He was able to go 5 strong innings. He allowed 2 runs in this one. He had only 2 strikeouts, but he did a very good job of being able to limit damage. So I really like that about him. He didn't give up any walks. And then how about the bullpen being able to step up for the Giants? They were able to deliver 4 strong innings in this one. And then the difference maker on offense for the Giants in this one, Evan Longoria, he was able to drive in an RBI in this one. I really like the way that he's able to give this team a little bit of a bat, because we could tell that the Giants are getting a little bit older. Buster Posey is just not what he once was. Brandon Belt hasn't necessarily been doing much the past couple years. Gerardo Parra, not necessarily the best guy either out there in that lineup. But with that said, Evan Longoria is a guy that you can rely upon for some good, solid offense. So that's what happened in baseball yesterday. Now we got to turn the page forward. Still got to take a little bit more of a broad picture look at the season in general, but going to take a look at a couple guys that are going to be pitching on Sunday as well. And we're going to do so with Matt Snyder of CBS Sports. That is coming up right here on MLB Overtime Betting.
Greg is going to the bullpen as he makes a call to the Azuña hotline.
And welcome back to MLB Overtime Betting. Greg Peterson broadcasting from the Azuña Tequila Studios out here in beautiful Las Vegas. It is a great pleasure to be joined by our next guest. He does tremendous work as a writer out there for CBS Sports. You can follow him on Twitter at Matt Snyder CBS. And it is Matt Snyder. It would be a little bit weird if I said at Matt Snyder CBS and then I announced like Brian Schmo out there in Nowheresville, Louisiana. But Matt, how are you doing on this fine day?
I'm great. It's Major League Baseball season, so I'm happy.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm one of those people. I love college basketball, and I'm a bit sad that that's come to an end. But with that said, with one season coming to an end, another one starts up in baseball. And how about the start of the season for the Seattle Mariners? They wind up winning 3 straight games. Obviously, they go to Japan, and they win those 2 games against the Oakland A's. It looked like they were going to be able to get to 4 straight wins, but then Hunter Strickland sort of blew that game. But with that said, I actually really like what I'm seeing out of the Mariners thus far.
Yeah, it was kind of a bummer to see that one, a home run for the Red Sox, because you were just thinking like, man, the Mariners starting 4-0 after it looked like a rebuild. It was just kind of a turning over of the roster. I mean, they kept Mitch Haniger. They brought back guys that could help this year, like Domingo Santana, Edwin Encarnacion. I actually I do a 5 overs and 5 unders column every year. I actually took the Mariners as an over. I don't think they're going to be a contender or anything, but the over-under at the time was, I believe, 72, and they've already got 3 wins. So I think they're going to win 75, 76 games and be better than a lot of people thought. A lot of people thought after they see those trades, oh, they're going to be awful. They're better than that. They're not going to be a contender, but a lot to like Tim Beckham and Domingo Santana so far.
I completely agree with you. This is a team that they do have some pop in their lineup as well. You've even got a guy like Ryan Healy who's able to hit some home runs as well. So I do like what I'm seeing on the Mariners. And I feel like the AL West, aside from the Houston Astros, is a little bit of a hodgepodge because you've got the Angels out there. They've got some nice bats, but what are you going to get out of Albert Pujols, Cole Calhoun at the top of the lineup? The Oakland A's badly overachieved last year, in my opinion. I still think they're going to be good, but at the same time, I don't know if they're going to be able to maximize what they did last year. And then you got the Texas Rangers, which, let's face it, Rangers just aren't good.
No, I agree on the A's. I think there's no way they come close to 97 wins last year. That was just a magical run. Yeah, I feel like second place really is totally up for grabs. The Angels, they need better starting pitching. Maybe some of the new guys like Harvey, Trevor Cahill end up having good seasons. Andrew Heaney being hurt is very worrisome because he's had issues with his arm pretty much throughout his career. It looked like he was going to kind of break through after last year. So, and they don't know, of course, Ohtani he's hurt from pitching and he's not going to be their DH for a little bit. So the Angels probably have the second best talent when everything's right, but everything's not right now. So it's wide open for second place in that division for me.
Matt Snyder is joining me right here on MLB Overtime Betting. You can follow him on Twitter at Matt Snyder CBS. And a team that I'm very curious to see how they do this year is the Chicago Cubs, because last year we saw them have a little bit of a collapse towards the end of the year, but actually I wouldn't necessarily call it a collapse, just the Brewers getting just smoking hot at the end of the year out there in the NL Central. I think that's a more fair way of putting it.
It is.
This year, they've got a couple question marks in their starting rotation with regards to the pitching. You've obviously got Yu Darvish. Kyle Hendricks is a guy that was a little bit of an enigma to me. But with that said, I do think that the Cubs can have a very good season because they do have so many bats. I look for them being one of the better offensive teams out there in the NL.
Yeah, their offense just fell apart down the stretch. Yeah, you're right, though. They had a winning record in September. They didn't collapse as much as the Brewers just stole it from them. So you have to give credit to the Brewers for doing that. I think their offense is going to be among the best in the National League, if not the best in the National League. It's just a matter of if the pitching holds up. Because if you look at the upside of Yu Darvish and Jose Quintana and Kyle Hendricks and John Lester and Cole Hamels, you could see that being one of the best rotations in baseball. But there's a lot of downside there. Lester and Hamels run the wrong side of 35. Yu Darvish has a lot of injury history to be concerned about. Quintana was not good last year. Hendricks has gone through stretches where his velocity is not high enough and he's getting knocked around. So you could see it being a pretty bad rotation too. It's just probably going to end up somewhere in the middle. But if they're around league average in the rotation, they're probably either the best team in the National League or second best behind the Dodgers.
And another team that I have massive questions in regards to the starting pitching is the Atlanta Braves, just because I'm right now noticing that on the 10-day injured list, you've got Kevin Gausman and Mike Fultonavich. Both these guys are absolutely critical. We're seeing them trotting out there some very random pitchers, as it looks like on Sunday on the bump for them is going to be Kyle Wright. I don't know if he's ever made a start in his career at the major league level. I just don't know what I'm going to be able to get out of the Braves this year, especially with the NL East being much improved, with the Phillies making all those acquisitions and the Mets getting some bats as well.
Kind of surprised that right when Fulte and Gausman were both hurt at the same time that they didn't come to a deal with Dallas Keuchel, just to have some veteran stability in the rotation other than Tehran, who's inconsistent, instead of just throwing a bunch of kids out there, especially when the Nationals got better, the Phillies got better, the Mets got better. This is a really hard division, just like the NL Central. It's a really, really hard division. And they signed Josh Donaldson, but other than that, they didn't really improve. And the other three teams got a lot better in the offseason. And now your top two arms in the rotation are banged up. I agree with you. They're in a rough spot right now. I picked them to finish fourth in the division, and looking at the rotation, that only solidifies that bet for me.
Absolutely, as we've got Matt Snyder on the horn right here on MLB Overtime Betting. And I remember you were talking about the 5 overs and the 5 unders that you took before the season in regards to win total. Can you get a little bit more in depth on some of the teams that you took over? Because I know that the Mariners are one of them. This is a team that I'm pretty high on. I like what I've seen towards the beginning of the year. Or other couple teams that you like?
Cubs were over 87.5. They won 95 last year. And while they're not necessarily better, they're similar to me. And they had a lot of guys who were either hurt or underachieved last year, who I expect to bounce back. So I wouldn't have taken over 92 because the division's really hard, but over 87.5 for me was good. Took over on the Red Sox because it was like 93. I don't think they're necessarily going to win over 100 again, but I feel like they're definitely going to get over 93. Blue Jays were over. It was 73. I don't think they're good, but there's a lot of bad AL teams, so I just kind of liked that number. I took under on the Reds. There were 78. I know a lot of people think they're going to be a breakthrough, and I love the offense. But Scooter's hurt now, and the rotation, you're counting on a lot of bounce back from Sonny Gray and Tanner Roark. Gosh, off the top of my head, who else did they add now?
Sonny Gray, yeah.
Sonny Gray, Tanner Roark, Alex Wood, and Alex Wood's hurt. So I was just like, man, that's a tough division. Tough division. And I just don't know about those arms. I kind of feel like those guys were all has-beens. Other than Wood, but he's hurt, like I said. So those are a few off the top of my head.
And another team that I think everyone was looking under, even though the win total was set on the open at 59, is the Baltimore Orioles. Yeah. Is there any reason to back this team on any day? Because I'm not seeing any redeeming qualities on this roster whatsoever. I'm just taking a look up and down the roster, and some of these guys, I study baseball quite a bit. I've never heard of them before.
Yeah, Cedric Mullins, I think, is fun.
Yeah.
Maybe Mancini, the little intrigue there. Maybe Chris Davis will hit a lot of home runs. It's in such a bad spot organizationally. I talked with someone else about this the other day. Is what's amazing about it is we have so many people complaining about how many teams are not trying, and we're talking about tanking. And the Orioles were historically bad last year. They were actually trying. Like, they didn't trade Manny Machado until the trade deadline. Heading into the year, they were trying. They signed Alex Cobb in the offseason. They signed Andrew Kashner in the offseason. They were trying, and they were still that bad. And now you look at the roster, and there's not really much that's tradable that'll get anything back. Whew. That's going to be a long rebuild. I did not touch the under on that because it's such a low number, but it feels like if you had to bet, you'd bet the under.
Oh, absolutely. With one of the teams I do like, though, how about the Colorado Rockies? They're able to win their first 2 games against the Miami Marlins, and I do like the way that the Rockies have really revamped that pitching staff. I feel like Kyle Freeland is a very good ace for this team. John Gray is going to be going on the mound on Sunday for this team against the Marlins, and we've noticed that the Rockies are a team that they can really put runs up in bunches, even when they're away from Coors Field, which I think is a very good quality for this team. We saw it when they were playing on Friday when they were able to put up a 4 spot in the 9th against the Marlins.
Yeah, it's funny how you traditionally think of the Rockies all hit and no pitch, and it's just mostly because of the ballpark. It's not their fault. Their strength is their rotation. It's a really good rotation. It's relatively young, especially at the top with Freeland and Marquez. Offensively, they're thin for me. I mean, I like the Murphy signing. He's a good fit in that ballpark, but Blackmon took big steps back last year. Arenado's awesome. Story had a big breakout year last year, but the back half of that lineup with Dahl, Desmond, McMahon, Iannetta, it's not great. Like, they're going to get propped up by Coors Field a lot of the year stat-wise. So it's funny to me that their strength is pitching, other than Arenado.
Oh, yes, obviously Arenado, one of the best players out there in the big leagues. He is worth every bit of that contract extension they got in the offseason, as we're talking to Matt Snyder of CBS right here on MLB Overtime Betting. And the one question that you do have with the Rockies, even though they signed a lot of bullpen arms last year, is that bullpen. Are there a couple other teams that you feel like could have very good years that, you know what, maybe the bullpen might be a little bit of an issue? Because I noticed a lot of teams out there in the NL, like the Brewers, like the Cardinals, they did a very good job of being able to either vamp up or maintain the good bullpens that they had.
Well, we already talked about them, but the Cubs. Morrow's hurt right now, so then you get Strop out of his setup role into the closer role. In front of him, a lot of question marks, like Carl Edwards Jr., big upside, but he's been really inconsistent. What kind of guy is Brad Brack going to be? And you're getting down to like Kinsler and Densing. The Cubs, like I said, the rotation, it could go really good, really bad. The bullpen is a big question mark there as well.
And then, are there any teams with some good young pitching in regards to starters that you might like? Because I think that the Pirates, with having Trevor Williams and Joe Musgrove, are a team that could be on a little bit of a come up. We all know about the young arms that the Brewers have with Brandon Woodruff and company. Are there a couple teams out there that you feel like could have some aces in the development this year?
Astros, Forrest Whitley. I don't know if they're ever going to be ready to put him in the rotation this year, but he's the best pitching prospect in baseball. And if they're challenged in the West, which they probably won't be, but if they're challenged, you could see Colin McHugh or Wade Miley or Brad Peacock not holding up in the rotation. Remember, McCullers is out for the season with Tommy John surgery. It looks like Josh James is going to be sticking the bullpen. At some point, the Astros might say, you know what, it's time. Let's bring up Forrest Whitley. He could be an ace almost immediately.
And then another guy that I noticed is going on Sunday. I was talking to Dan Zimborski about this. Chris Paddock of the San Diego Padres. Are you a little bit bullish on him?
Yes. I should have mentioned him before because he's in the rotation. Yes. Look, spring stats don't always translate, and for the most part, you shouldn't pay attention to him, but this is a 23-year-old with really, really high talent level, and he was pitching to try to make the opening day roster, and he succeeded at it. I think he's going to carry that momentum in. The Giants offense just is not that good. I think he's going to have a great outing, and that's going to position him for possibly a Rookie of the Year run, although it's going to be a crowded field in the NL, specifically with one of his teammates, Fernando Tatis Jr.
I've heard such good things about Tatis Jr. as well. I'm very excited to be able to watch him day out and day in and day out. And Matt, would like to close it up with this. Where can the good people find your work out there on CBS, social media, and elsewhere?
Matt Snyder's TBS on Twitter, cbssports.com/MLB. I'll be all over both of those.
Fantastic. A big thanks to Matt Snyder for joining me right here on MLB Overtime Betting. And coming up next, it's time to give you a side and total on every game that's going down in Major League Baseball today as we touch them all.
Hey, I'm Steve Heitner, the guy who uttered the famous phrase, "That's gold." And that's the inspiration of my new podcast, That's Gold with Steve Heitner. We talk sports, sports betting, movies, comedy, food, drink, Vegas, music, movies, and more. 5 days a week. Did I say movies twice? Look, guys love it, whether they're hip or worried about breaking a hip. Find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify and Stitcher. That's Gold with me, Steve Heitner.
Welcome back to MLB Overtime. Greg is throwing a gem, so yeah, he better not blow it.
Special thanks, Matt Snyder of CBS's MLB coverage, as we are back here in the Zuni Tequila Studios for MLB Overtime Betting. Always good to get his perspective on things. Always join me on the Vegas Sites and Information Network. So great to have him aboard, and great to have you aboard, as now it is time to give you a side and total on every game on the baseball betting board as we touch them all.
If a game is listed on the betting board, Greg has a side and a total on it, so it is time to touch them all.
Any changes are made to these plays today. Going to be doing it on my Twitter page at unit_81. There's some plays I'm still sort of waiting on numbers with and everything like that. There's a game or two with lineup changes as well, so those will also be noted on my Twitter page at unit_81. You'll notice that most of these plays are locked in, but there are a couple I'm still waiting on lines on. And we start with 951, 952 on the betting rotation. It is the Cincinnati Reds, and they are at home to take on the Pittsburgh Pirates. Currently, no starting pitchers are listed because yesterday's game got rained out. If I were to guess, I would think that we are going to get Trevor Williams and Sonny Gray for the pitching matchup when this game was taken off the board. Pirates were plus 120-ish. Reds were right around minus 130. Total I was seeing was 8.5. If this is the case, I would have to go under, and I would have to take the Pirates. I mentioned this yesterday. Trevor Williams, just one of the best pitchers out there in baseball. We noticed Sonny Gray be able to do a very good job in spring training. And the Pirates don't have a whole heck of a lot of offense, but they do have a couple guys that mash, like Corey Dickerson and company. Jung Ho Kong, I've liked what I've seen out of him in spring training as well as in the regular season thus far. And then with the Reds, you've got Eugenio Suarez and Joey Votto, but they don't have a whole lot of guys that do a great job of hitting for contact. I really like the way that Trevor Williams pitched towards the end of last year, so I would go under, and I would go with the Pirates with a plus price. Like I said, the pitching matchup is not confirmed yet, and neither are the prices, so that's just me spitballing, trying to give you a little bit of information on a game that's off the board. When a line is listed, plays will be up on my Twitter page at unit_81. 953, 954 on the betting rotation. You've got the Colorado Rockies on the road to face off against the Miami Marlins. The Marlins, who were victorious on Saturday, are plus 138, Rockies minus 148, and these are all Westgate numbers, by the way. My tracker that I usually use for consensus numbers has been acting up on me a little bit today, so these are all Westgate numbers. Just throwing that out there right now to be transparent. And then the total I am seeing at the Westgate is 7.5 with the over at minus 120. I am on the over in this game, but I certainly did not get minus 120. I wound up playing minus 105. Anything at like 110, I would certainly advise to play on the over. If you're able to get a plus price and it balloons up to 8, that's something I would recommend as well. But I'm all about the Rockies in this game, as they've got John Gray going for them as the starting pitcher. And then for the Miami Marlins, it is Sandy Alcantara. And this is a spot where I'm not just looking at the Rockies to be able to win this game. I'm looking at the Rockies on the run line at this price. They're currently plus 115 on the run line. John Gray, far from a great pitcher, but with that said, he was actually better towards the second half of last year. We've seen some flashes of brilliance from him. Meanwhile, Sandy Alcantara, this is a guy that the jury's still out on him, to be honest with you. He had a couple starts last year. He never really showed anything awful. But with that said, I actually do really like what I've seen out of the Rockies so far this year. David Dahl has been doing a good job of being able to hit. Trevor Story seems to be doing a better job of not striking out. He's able to hit to contact a little bit more. We all know about Nolan Arenado and company. Daniel Murphy also comes over in the offseason, and these totals have just been going over all season long for these two teams, so I think that this is another play to the over. I know that Miami has a little bit more of a pitcher's park, and Sandy Alcantara had right around a 3.5 ERA last year, so he's a guy that's up and coming. But with that said, when he did get hit, he got hit hard, and he's not too much of a strikeout guy, and I think the Rockies are going to be able to exploit that. John Gray himself, not necessarily a guy that's going to be fanning a lot of guys as well, so I think that we're going to get a lot of contact in this game. You take a look at John Gray last year, he had a 12-9 record, but with that said, his ERA was north of 5. He had 183 strikeouts and 172.5 innings. I actually thought it was a little bit worse. Like I said, he pitches the contact. His opponents hit 266 off of him. So I think that we're going to get quite a few runs in this game. I see Colorado being able to get a 6-3, 6-4 style win in this one. So for that reason, I am playing this total over, and the Rockies run line with both of these plays locked in. Over at the Westgate, we've got 955, 956 on the betting rotation as it is the New York Mets in Washington to face off against the Nationals. Nationals are minus 130, Mets are plus 120, and the over-under on this game is 7.5, minus 110 each way. This is a spot where I do have to take a look at the Washington Nationals. They dropped the first 2 games of this series, but they do send to the mound Patrick Corbin, who I really like lefty for the Nationals. And then on the other side for the New York Mets, you've got Zach Wheeler going. And Wheeler was good for the team last year. He was 12-9, right around a 3.5 ERA. He was able to give this team some good performance. And I do think that Patrick Corbin is really going to try to prove that he's worth the money that he was paid in the offseason. He's had a dramatic rise the past couple years. With the Diamondbacks in 2016, he had a 5.15 ERA. He lowered that in 2017 to 4.13, and then last year he was sensational. 11-7, 3.15 ERA with 246 strikeouts. He saw his strikeouts also rise by at least 45 in each of those years as well. He allowed opponents only hit 218 off of him, so he did a very impressive job in that regard. And then Zach Wheeler is a guy that does a pretty good job of being able to limit damage as well. The guy that I really think that is going to be able to get to him, though, is Victor Robles. Victor Robles has actually come out of the season pretty smoking hot. 429 with a home run so far this year. I really like what he's doing. You've got Ryan Zimmerman being able to drive in some RBIs. And we've seen the New York Mets have really ramped up their offense as well. These two teams played an 11-8 game yesterday. Both these teams were really swinging for the fences. Juan Soto is in the middle of that Nationals lineup. I like him. Brandon Nimmo actually did not get a hit in the Mets' 11-run performance yesterday, but it was the bottom of the lineup that was able to get the job done as Jeff McNeil wound up having 4 hits in that game. Wilson Ramos was able to score 3 runs in that one as well. And then you have Michael Conforto being able to do a nice job out there in the middle of the lineup with 2 hits as well. And the Mets didn't even have a home run in that game, and they had an 0-for-5 performance from Robinson Cano, so I can only imagine what's going to be happening in this game. I think that both these teams are doing a very good job of hitting, and both these teams have some big questions with regards to their bullpen. Even though you've got some good starting pitching out there, I'm going to have to play this total over. I feel so good about this total that I wound up finding an 8 at plus 110, so that way I get a little bit of plus price. Obviously, still advise to play at 7.5 at minus 110, and I did lock in the Washington Nationals as a play as well. We move on to the St. Louis Cardinals doing battle with the Milwaukee Brewers out there in the fine city of Milwaukee. 957, 958 on the betting rotation as it is the Brewers, a minus 116 favorite at home, and we are seeing the total of 8 in this one with the over at minus 120. The under is even money, and going for the Brewers is going to be Corbin Burns, and for the St. Louis Cardinals, you've got Michael Wacha. This is a spot where I do have to take a look at the St. Louis Cardinals. Wacha had his season derailed last year by injury, but before he went down, he was very good for this team. And Corbin Burns, we saw him have some very good performances with the Milwaukee Brewers, but I feel like I'm taking a little bit more of a known commodity with the St. Louis Cardinals in this spot. I do know that both these teams have really been mashing the ball in this series so far. Paul Goldschmidt has been doing a great job ever since coming over for the St. Louis Cardinals. He once again drove in some runs on Saturday, so he's been doing the job. Christian Yelich already has a pair of home runs for the Milwaukee Brewers, so we've been seeing a lot of runs scored in this series. But I do think that Corbin Burns is going to get knocked around a little bit. I think that there might be a little bit of rust for Michael Wacha as well, so I am going to play this total over. I know like Corbin Burns was sensational last year, but he was a reliever last year. In all 30 of the appearances that he made with the Brewers last year, none of them were starts. He was 7-0 with a 2.61 ERA, and just coming into the game to start rather than being a bullpen arm, it's just a completely different animal. Brewers are currently without Jeremy Jeffries as well. That hurts them a little bit. Brett Cecil currently on the 60-day injury list for the St. Louis Cardinals, so they're not going to have him for a while. And then it appears as though Corey Knebel also on the injured list for the Brewers. So Brewers are right now a little bit down with their bullpen. And I have a feeling with this being the 4th game in 4 days, if the Brewers have to rely on their bullpen, they might not get the best effort. Same goes for the Cardinals, so I do see a lot of runs being scored, but I do think that the guys on the Cardinals are really getting the job done. I like what I'm seeing out of Colton Wong and company. You still have Yadier Molina, who's obviously aging a little bit for this team, but with that said, he's still a very good bat. And I just think that all in all, St. Louis is going to be able to get to 5 runs in this game, and they're going to be able to win this game and push the total over. So for that reason, I am on the St. Louis Cardinals and the over in the spot with both these plays locked in. 959, 960 on the betting rotation. The Arizona Diamondbacks are still in town to face off against the Los Angeles Dodgers over at the Westgate. The Diamondbacks are plus 205, the Dodgers minus 230, and if you're looking at a run line price for the Dodgers, that is minus 115 with them laying a run and a half. And then the over is currently at minus 115 with the total on that set at 7.5. If you like the under at 7.5, that is minus 105. And I actually do like the under in this game because you take a look at the starting pitching. You've got Walker Buehler going for the Los Angeles Dodgers and Luke Weaver on the hill for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Walker Buehler was absolutely sensational for the Dodgers last year. He had an ERA below 2.5. He was arguably their best starter during the postseason last year. And I say that knowing that Clayton Kershaw was out there for the Dodgers. He was lights out for them. But with that said, I do think that Luke Weaver is going to be able to have some success in this one. And I do think that with both these bullpens being a little bit used up after having that extra inning game on Friday and obviously having to play again on Saturday, I do think that it plays into the hands of the Arizona Diamondbacks a little bit more because they were using a little bit more long relief. Weaver is not a guy that was necessarily great with the St. Louis Cardinals last year, but I feel like he was better than his 7-11 record indicates. He does pitch a contact. He had opposing hitters hit about 280 off of him. And with the Dodgers, you've got a bunch of guys that are able to hit the ball out of the ballpark. You've got Justin Turner, Jock Peterson, Corey Seager, the list goes on and on and on. I mean, the Los Angeles Dodgers are a mash unit. I mean, even Kike Hernandez and A.J. Pollock are doing a great job for this team. What I do like is that for the Diamondbacks are able to counter with some good bats of their own. David Peralta is a guy that's really on the come up. He's had a nice start to the year even though he hasn't hit a home run. He hit 30 of them last year. Christian Walker has been able to provide a nice little bolt. Last year he had 3 home runs and batted just a $163 in very, very limited amount of time. He was already hitting 600 with 2 home runs and 5 RBIs going into Saturday night's game. You've obviously got Adam Jones who came over from the Baltimore Orioles. Noah Ahmad is a guy that I like as well. So I do think the Diamondbacks can win sort of a 3-2 style game. I do think that Luke Weaver actually matches up well. I actually like his stuff in this spot. And I do think that Walker Buehler might have a little bit of regression from last year. I think that this is a game in which the bats don't get quite going as much as they did the past couple days. Dodger Stadium, as we know, is very much a pitcher-friendly park. And you know what? I think that Luke Weaver is going to have a good outing. So I am taking the massive plus price here with the Diamondbacks. I'm seeing plus 210 at a couple other places as well. I'm going to see if I'm going to be able to get a plus 225. So holding off a little bit there. I already fired it on the under. I was able to get even money on the under. Obviously, still advise a play at minus 105. 961, 962 on the betting rotation. You've got the San Francisco Giants on the road to face off against the San Diego Padres. The Padres are minus 150. The Padres have their star young pitcher and Chris Paddock going. And for the Giants, it's good old Jeff Samardzija. Total on this one is at 8, minus 110 both ways on that total. This is one where I was able to get a little bit of more favorable juice on the under, and I wound up taking it because Jeff Samardzija, I have a feeling he's going to be in for a little bit of a career rebirth this year. He was just absolutely awful last year, but this is a guy that is pitched quite well throughout his career. He's going to be at Petco Park, so obviously there's a little bit more forgiveness for a guy that does give up quite a bit of contact, as Jeff Samardzija does. Last year was just a year that he really wants to forget. He was 1-5 with a 6.25 ERA. Last time he was fully healthy was in 2017. He was just 9-15, but he was a little bit of a tough luck loser. He had 205 strikeouts to 32 walks that year, so he was doing a very good job of being able to pitch to contact and being able to not give away free passes, which I do like. And then with Paddock, we've talked to some of our guests about him. He's got some very electrifying stuff. He looked absolutely sensational in spring training. But with that said, when you're called up to the majors, it's a whole different animal. I do think he's going to pitch well, but I think he's going to give up a couple couple runs. I could see a guy like Evan Longoria being able to hit a solo shot, maybe a Brandon Belt as well. I do like what they bring to the table. With the Padres, you do have a lot of pop in the lineup. Ian Kinsler already has a home run for this team. Will Myers has been raking for them so far this year. Manny Machado hasn't necessarily gotten going, and I don't know if Manny Machado ever will. I feel like he's very overrated. I think that his huge numbers last year was just him crying out for help, trying to get out of the city of Baltimore. But with that said, you still do have some power bats out there with the San Diego Padres, including the guy that I haven't already mentioned in Eric Hosmer Jr. Fernando Tatis Jr. has been lighting it up for them. So you do have some good bats. With this game being pitched in Petco Park and Jeff Samardzija being a man on a mission this year, I think that he's going to be able to hold up in this one, and I do think that Buster Posey and Brandon Crawford bring something to the middle of that Giants lineup. So for that reason, I am on this total under, and I am on the Giants getting a plus price. And with that said, I have already locked in both the Giants and the under. 963, 964 on the betting rotation. This is the featured ESPN game between the Atlanta Braves, who are on the road to face off against the Philadelphia Phillies. On the bump for the Philadelphia Phillies, it is going to be Jake Arrieta, and the Atlanta Braves are trotting out their Kyle Wright. This just feels like a total mismatch. I know that Jake Arrieta was susceptible to giving up a couple runs last year, but this is a guy in Kyle Wright that has never made a start in his career. He's pitched 6 career MLB innings. This is just not good for the Atlanta Braves, with Mike Fultonavich and Kevin Gausman currently on the 10-day injured list, along with a reliever and AJ Minter. It's just not good news for this team. They're trotting out there a bunch of arms that are not good. They don't have much of a bullpen right now. They don't have a lot of starting pitching. And with the Philadelphia Phillies, you've got a team that's just absolutely lighting the world on fire on offense right now. They have scored a combined 18 runs in the first 2 games of the series. I don't see what changes. Currently, the total is set at 9. The over is even money. The under is -9. This is one in which I just had to go over 9 at even money, and I already locked this one in. This was just a no-brainer for me. And I do think that the Phillies are going to be able to get another convincing win in this game. The Phillies run line is currently set at +135 at -1.5. I wound up going run line in this one. Bryce Harper was able to hit his first home run with the Phillies yesterday. You also had JT Realmuto being able to give this team another good game. Andrew McCutchen is now in the lineup. You still have Rhys Hoskins, who's really going under the radar for this team. He was a guy that was really hitting the ball at the ballpark towards the end of the year last year. You've got Gene Segura. You still have Herrera. You've got so many guys that are doing such a good job of being able to match home runs for this team. Meanwhile, for the Braves, you still do have some good bats for this team as well. They do bring in the offseason, a good addition in Josh Donaldson. He's not really been hitting so far. He went hitless in the team's first 2 games, but you're able to add him to a lineup that includes Ronald Acuna Jr., Nick Markakis, and Ozzie Albies. It makes this team very lethal. Dansby Swanson seems to be coming around, and Enciarte is a guy that I like at the top of the lineup as well. I think it's going to be runs aplenty, but I think that the Phillies are going to be able to get to 7, and I think they're going to be able to win this game by 2+ runs. So with that said, I have these 2 all locked in, the over and Phillies run line. Game 965, 966 on the betting rotation. You've got the Baltimore Orioles in town to face off against the New York Yankees out there in the beautiful city of New York, as the over-under on this game is 9, with the over at +110, the under -130. The Yankees, with J.A. Happ on the mound, are -360 favorites. The Orioles +310. This is the spot where I've got to look at the Yankees run line here. I was able to get -160 on the Yankees run line. Currently, I'm seeing at the Westgate at -170. I advise to play either way. J.A. Happ was really able to do a great job of pitching when he came over to New York. He was able to do a decent job while he was out there with the Toronto Blue Jays, but you could tell that the move really helped him out. And with Dylan Bundy, oh man, you just don't know what you're going to get from this guy from game to game. I still remember there was a one start last year where he gave up 10 runs without recording a single out. I believe that was actually documented as the worst start in the history of baseball. Last year, he was 8-16 with a 5.45 ERA. He's able to get strikeouts. He had 184 strikeouts in 171.2 innings. But with that said, he just pitches way too much contact. He allowed a batting average of .274. He also walked 54 guys last year. And with Yankee Stadium being such a bandbox, I just think that the Yankees are going to rip the cover off the ball. Yesterday was a little bit of an anomaly as the Orioles actually got a win by a count of 5-3. So if you took the run line, you were able to save a little bit of juice there. But I think that the Yankees bats are going to get going because they had 10 hits in that game yesterday. They just left a couple too many men on base as they were 3 of 9 with runners in scoring position and left 11 men on. You've got Troy Tulowitzki now at the bottom of the lineup. You're bringing DJ LeMahieu to go along with guys like Brett Gardner, Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, Luke Voigt, Miguel Andujar, Gary Sanchez. That's just a murderer's row right there. And the Orioles are actually showing that they've got a couple guys who are able to score themselves. Jonathan Sucre, who's been able to come in and been able to give this team a couple runs out there at the catcher spot. I like what he does. Jonathan Villar at the top of the lineup is a guy that's able to get on base. I actually liked him with his days at the Milwaukee Brewers. And Trey Boom Boom Mancini is a guy that's able to take a yard as well. He had 24 home runs last year and 24 home runs the year before. Saw his batting average dip a little bit last year, but with that said, he's doing a decent job of putting the ball in play so far this year. So I do think that there's going to be a lot of runs. So I took the plus price with the over, and I wound up taking the Yankees via run line. I just think that J.A. Happ is going to be able to give a much better start than Dylan Bundy. So I am going to go with the Yankees run line, and I'm going with the over. Both these plays locked in. 967, 968 on the betting rotation. You've got the Detroit Tigers north of the border taking on the Toronto Blue Jays. It is the Blue Jays minus 130 favorites, Tigers plus 120. If you're taking a look at the over-under, the total is 9, and the over is shaded at minus 115. And the starters in this game for the Detroit Tigers, they are trotting out there the one and only Matt Moore, and then you've got Trent Thornton on the other side going for the Toronto Blue Jays. Thornton is making his first career start. Meanwhile, Matt Moore, he's made a lot of starts, but over the past 2 years, his ERA has been hovering between a 6.7 and a 5.5, which is not necessarily redeeming qualities. With these two pitchers going, I think that it is a slam dunk that I'm going to be taking the over in this spot. I was able to get minus 105 juice on the over, and I locked it in. I would still advise it at minus 110 or maybe even minus 115 because I think that runs are going to be aplenty in this contest. We saw the Toronto Blue Jays be able to ignite their offense in the game on Saturday against the Detroit Tigers as the Tigers were able to rack up quite a few hits. Miguel Cabrera seemed to have a really nice game. You had Nick Candelario, who was able to get a couple hits as well, but with that said, they were unable to drive in any runs as the Blue Jays were able to win that game 3-0. I think both these offenses are due for a little bit of an outburst, so for that reason, I am going to be on this game over. Justin Smoke, I think, is going to be able to drive in a couple runs for this team. I do like what the Blue Jays are also getting out of the top of the lineup in Brandon Drury. He's a guy that's doing a good job of being able to get on base for this team, so I do think that he's going to be a little bit of a difference maker for this team this season. You've still got Kevin Pillar and Freddie Galvis towards the bottom of the lineup as well, which also are pretty good bottom of the lineup hitters. I think that the top of the lineup for the Blue Jays is a little bit weaker, but with that said, I do think that Nico Goodrum has a chance to be able to go yard for the Detroit Tigers. He was able to knock in 16 home runs last year. And then at the top of the lineup for the Detroit Tigers, Josh Harrison is a guy that I'm just not very bullish on whatsoever. I will be totally honest with you. He was able to hit 250 with 8 home runs last year, and in 2017 with the Pirates, he was pretty good as well, but we've seen a precipitous drop-off with his play in recent years. I've never really taken a liking to him, but with that said, the DH spot for the Tigers, I feel like he's actually in good hands with Christian Stewart. He's gotten off to a little bit of a cold start so far this year, but I really liked what I saw out of him in the minors, and I think that he's going to develop. And I think that this is a spot where we're going to have a big-time bullpen day with these two pitchers going. I think that runs are going to be aplenty in this spot, and I'm going with the Tigers in this game because I do like the Tigers bullpen a little bit better than the Blue Jays. And even though Matt Moore absolutely sucks, I am going to be on the Tigers here, and I'm going to be on the over. Already locked in the over. I'm currently waiting for a little bit of a better price on the Tigers, trying to see if I can get 125 or greater. Game 969, 970 on the betting rotation is currently off the board, as that is the Houston Astros on the road to face off against the Tampa Bay Rays. We know that Wade Miley is going to be the starter for the Houston Astros. For the Tampa Bay Rays, it is to be determined. They're likely going to be doing the opener, which means I'll probably be on the Houston Astros in this spot. And if you give me either a total of 8 with the over at like even money or something like that, or 7.5 with minus 110 juice, I'm going to be on the over. I know that Tropicana field does not really give up too many runs, and Wade Miley had a great year last year with the Brewers, but I do have my questions with him. I'm probably going to be on the Astros if I get a decent price as well, but this is a spot where, with not knowing what the Tampa Bay Rays are going to be trotting out there, it is a little bit of a horse apiece as to the analysis I can give you. I can tell you right now that the Rays are doing a little bit of a better job of hitting than I expected. They have won each of the past 2 games in the series, scoring 4 and 3 runs in those 2 games. And for the hot shell Rays, what I do really like for them in regards to their lineup is the fact that G-Man Choi has been able to step up for them. He was able to have a pair of hits for them. Tommy Pham has been a nice addition over there at the 2 spot as well. So I do think that the Rays are doing a little bit of a better job of hitting, and I do think that the Astros, with guys like Springer and Altuve at the top of the lineup, are going to be due for quite a few hits in this one as well. Alex Bregman has gotten off to a little bit of a slow start. Would not be surprised if he's able to get multiple hits regardless of who the Rays trot out there. So probably going to be looking under and at the Astros, but once again, with not knowing the starting pitching situation, cannot give you any sort of a play on this because it is currently off the board. 971, 972 on the betting rotation. It is the Cleveland Indians on the road to face off against the Minnesota Twins. The Twins are even money, and the Indians are minus 110 at the Westgate. The over-under is set at 7, with the over shaded at minus 115, under at minus 105. And the starting pitchers for this game, for the Indians, you've got on the mound 1, Carlos Carrasco. And then for the Minnesota Twins, it is Michael Pineda. Pineda has not pitched in the majors ever since 2017. And in that year, he had right around a 4.35 ERA. He was 8-4 with this team. But with that said, he pitched quite a bit to contact, which is why I do think that this total is going to go over. Carlos Carrasco has wipeout stuff. He had over 230 strikeouts in just under 200 innings last year. But with that said, he is a little bit susceptible to giving up the long ball, even though he went 17-10 last year. I know that the Indians are currently without Lindor in the starting lineup. That's obviously a little bit of a woe for this team, but they did pick up Hanley Ramirez in the offseason. He's already provided this team with a couple hits and a home run, so I like what he's able to do for this team. They picked up Brad Miller from the Milwaukee Brewers in the offseason, and he's been able to provide a couple hits. They're still without Jason Kipnis, obviously, but you've still got Jose Ramirez as well. So I do think that there's enough hitting for Cleveland to be able to rough up Michael Pineda a little bit. And then for the Minnesota Twins, I think that they're going to get Nelson Cruz going. So far this year, he hasn't really gotten it going, as the Twins as a team have not hit a home run yet, but Marwin Gonzalez already has 2 RBIs for this team. Nelson Cruz, I think, is going to be able to get things going with his bat as well. And then when you take a look at the Minnesota Twins, they do have a lot of guys that do a good job of being able to hit for contact. I actually think it's a little bit of a good thing that they're currently without Miguel Sano, as last year he was a big disappointment for this team. They expected a little bit more from him. He is currently out of the lineup, but they do have Jonathan Scope, who I'm just not crazy about, to say the least. And they do have CJ Cron, who's a guy that really came around last year. I do think that the key for this team being successful this year is being able to get Eddie Rosario going. He's been held hitless the first 2 games. And I do like the Indians bullpen as well, but I think that with these 2 starting pitchers going, both these offenses get a little bit ignited. So for that reason, I'm going to take this total over. But with that said, with Pineda on the mound, I'm going to take the more known commodity and a guy that's not coming off of injury in Carlos Carrasco. I'm holding off on the price right now, as the Indians are currently minus 110. I'm trying to see if I can get minus 105 or even money, but already locked in the over on this game. Game 973, 974 on the betting rotation. It is the White Sox taking on the Kansas City Royals. Lucas Giolito is going for the Chicago White Sox, and for the Kansas City Royals, it is Jorge Lopez, as the White Sox currently plus 105 at the Westgate. Kansas City Royals minus 115. The over-under on this game is set at 9, with a minus 110 both ways. This is one in which I really do have to take a look at the over, just because with the White Sox, you trot out there Lucas Giolito. He has been a guy that has not lived up to expectations, to say the least. I feel like I'm putting that very, very politely. And then with the White Sox, you've got a team that's able to put together a bunch of runs with guys like Jorge Moncada. You've got Jose Abreu out there that's doing a good job of being able to match for this lineup. So you've got a bunch of guys like Polka as well. So I do think that you've got a lot of power out there. And even though the Kansas City Royals don't have a lot of bomber bats, they still do have guys like Alex Gordon out there. You got like what Soler is able to do as well. He's a guy that I think is going to have a big year this year. And when you take a look at Lucas Giolito last year, he was 10-13, but he really pitched to contact. Opponents batted 250 off of him. He issued 90 free passes at 173 innings, and he gave up an ERA of 6.13. there's just not too many redeeming qualities with him whatsoever. I think that the Royals, who, oh, by the way, in their first 2 games have gotten to at least 5 runs in each of those games, I think are really going to be able to get to him. Lucas Giolito was actually a little bit of an under pitcher towards the end of last year, but at the beginning of the year, he was giving up overs left, right, and sideways. And then at the top of the lineup, you do have a pair of guys that do a very good job of being able to get on for this Royals team in Alberto Mondesi and Whit Merrifield as well. Merrifield likely the MVP of this team, and Ryan O'Hearn has actually done a decent job in this series as well. So I really do like the Royals being able to hang a 5 spot in this game and being able to get the win. Jorge Lopez himself pitches quite a bit to contact. He had 7 starts last year. He had a 6.35 ERA and allowed opponents to hit nearly 300 as well. So I think that we're going to get quite a few runs in this game. But with that said, I do think that the Royals are going to be able to get a little bit more offense, and I do think that Lopez, who is a little bit more of a young and up-and-coming pitcher, going to have a little bit of a better outing in this one. So I am on the over in this game, and I am on the Royals, and I have locked in the Royals play, and on the over, I'm trying to see if I can get a little bit better juice than just minus 110. 975, 976 on the betting rotation. It is the Angels in town to face off against the Oakland A's in the city of Oakland, as the over-under set at 9. The under is minus 120. The over is even money. And then for the Angels, they are trotting out there Tyler Skaggs. Meanwhile, for the Oakland A's, it is going to be a guy that saw a couple starts last year, and Frankie Montas. I just feel like Tyler Skaggs, much more of a pitcher that I want to back in this spot. I know that Montas was able to get 11 starts last year, and he was 5-4 with a 3.88 ERA. He was a very decent pitcher, but he's a guy that really pitches the contact. Opponents against him last year hit 290. Meanwhile, Tyler Skaggs, when he wasn't dealing with injuries, he was very good for this team last year. He was able to go 8-10, which doesn't necessarily sound great, but he did have over a strikeout per inning. He's a guy that also pitches the contact with a 262 batting average for opponents. Chris Davis has been doing a great job in this season so far. He's already mashed 3 home runs. We all know what he's able to do. And then another bat that you really need to take a look at for this Oakland A's team is Marcus Semien. He has gotten off to another hot start. Albert Pujols has yet to get it going, but with the Angels, you still have Mike Trout. Mike Trout is obviously the best player out there in baseball, and I don't think that there's any debating that. And then I do think that they're going to be able to get a little bit of something going with Cole Calhoun as well. Cole Calhoun at the top of the lineup was able to provide the team with a pair of hits on Fridays. They were able to get that 6-2 rally over the Oakland A's. I do think that the Angels are going to be able to get a good performance out of Skaggs in this one. And Montas himself is not necessarily a bad pitcher. And when you take a look at the A's bottom of the lineup, they're not getting much hitting from guys like Tommy LaStella, Zach Cozart, and Jonathan Lucroy. Meanwhile, for the Oakland A's, Matt Chapman has been doing a good job of being able to get off to a nice start so far this year. Robbie Grossman is not a guy that I'm necessarily sold on. And then when you've got Nick Hundley at the catcher spot, he's just not providing you a whole heck of a lot with the bat. And then Roman Loreno is a very, very good defender, not so much of a great hitter. I know that they brought in Kendrys Morales, but he's a guy that seems to go hot and cold as well. So I do think that this is a total that's going to go under. I just like Tyler Skaggs a little bit more in this pitching matchup. I think that he's going to be able to provide a quality start, and I do think that the A's bullpen is a little bit revamped and is going to be able to hold down the fort and be able to get this win. So for that reason, I am on the Angels and the under in the spot, and I have locked in both these plays. 977, 978 on the betting rotation. It is the Boston Red Sox in town to face off against the Seattle Mariners at T-Mobile Park, which is still very weird to say. Red Sox are minus 140, Mariners plus 130. The over on this game is even money. The under is minus 120, and that total is currently set at 9. This is a game in which I was holding off on the under at 8.5 at minus 110. Now that it's ticked up to 9 with minus 120 juice, I'm going to try to see if I can get that minus 110 juice before I lock it in, but it seems like this total is ticking upwards because when you take a look at the starting pitching matchup, you've got Rick Porcello on one side going for the Boston Red Sox, and for the Seattle Mariners, it is Wade LeBlanc, and LeBlanc was actually a decent pitcher for this team last year, and Rick Porcello really showed some flashes of brilliance. I know that both these offenses have been quite white hot to be able to start out this season, but with that said, LeBlanc actually had a good year last year. He was 9-5, was able to give this team 162 innings. He pitches the contact a little bit. Opponents hit 246 against him. He's not necessarily a guy that's going to be fanning too many guys. He had 130 strikeouts and 162 innings. With that said, I do think that Rick Porcello is a guy that is going to get the job done here. What I do notice about Porcello is that he either has a fantastic outing or he just gets completely shelled. There's not too much in between with him, and I think a lot of the reason why is because he had 190 strikeouts and 191 innings. Mitch Moreland has already gotten off to a nice start to the season, along with Mookie Betts. We saw the Red Sox being able to pull off a nice rally in that game on Friday in which they were able to win 7-6. This is a Red Sox team that can really put up runs in a hurry, but with that said, the Seattle Mariners do have a little bit of a revamp lineup themselves. They haven't gotten Jay Bruce really going yet. Edwin Encarnacion was a big pickup in the offseason, but the guy that they've really got hitting at this point is Tim Beckham. He already has 3 home runs, and that was going into the game Saturday evening, so he's done a great job for this team. Ryan Healy is a guy with some pop. D. Gordon does a good job of being able to provide this team some speed, even though he doesn't do the best job of being able to get on base. But with that said, I think that Porcello is a good matchup in this spot. He's got some good history with a lot of the guys that are on the Seattle Mariners roster, and I think that he's going to be able to get the job done, and I think the Red Sox are going to be out and hungry in this game. I think they're not just going to win this game, but I think they're going to be able to win this game by multiple runs. I think that Wade LeBlanc is due for a little bit of regression, and I think the Mariners bullpen just is not what it was last year. I am going to play this total under. I'm currently waiting to see if I can get some favorable juice at under 9, but I actually wound up taking the Red Sox on the run line in the spot. I wound up getting a plus 120 price. Currently, I'm seeing it posted at the Westgate at plus 115. Certainly would advise a play there. And then we wrap it up with the lone interleague game on the slate, 979-980. It is the Cubs in the Lone Star State to face off against the Texas Rangers. Cubs are currently minus 145. Rangers plus 135. It is Cole Hamels on the bump for the Chicago Cubs, and Lance Lynn is going for the Texas Rangers with the over-under on this game set at 9.5. The over is even money. The under is minus 120. This is a spot where I had to lock in the Cubs and the under in this spot. I do really like the way that Cole Hamels was able to pitch for this team last year. We all remember he was actually with the Texas Rangers last year, and he was really struggling with them to begin the year, and then he was just able to find it with this team. He was doing absolutely sensational. The wind seems to be blowing a little bit inwards in Texas these past couple days, so for that reason, I do think that it's going to help the ball be able to stay in the ballpark. Lance Lynn is a guy that he had his good starts last year. He had his bad starts. When he was with the New York Yankees, he was pitching a little bit better. He just needed to really get out of Minnesota because he got off to a little bit of a rough start last year. I think he's going to do everything possible to avoid that because last year he was in total 10-10 with a 4.77 ERA. He was able to do a much better job when he was in New York, though. And then with the Texas Rangers, you've got a bunch of all-or-nothing hitters, which I think is going to really play to the strength of Cole Hamels because he does a good job of being able to get so many guys out. With the Texas Rangers, you've got Rougned Odor, Joey Gallo, Nomar Mazara and company. I mean, Sin Chu does a very good job of being able to get on base for this team, but Delino DeShields Jr., currently the only reason why he's out there is for his defense. Isaiah Keener-Falafa is a guy that I need to see a little bit more from, but at the catcher spot, I actually do like him. But with that said, I do feel like Cole Hamels is the far superior starting pitcher, and then when you got guys like Anthony Rizzo, Javi Baez, Ben Zobrist and company in the lineup, I think that the Cubs should be able to get to 5 runs in this game. I think that Hamels holds Texas to 3 or fewer in this spot. So for that reason, locked in the Cubs and the under here, and that will do it for a Sunday edition of MLB Overtime Betting. A big thanks to Matt Snyder of CBS Sports for joining me in the last segment. And if you like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, you can subscribe on, well, we're currently not up on Apple iTunes quite yet, but that is in the process. When that is up, I will certainly be providing the link, and I will be touting that left, right, and sideways. But we are on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Google Play as well, so you can subscribe to all those fine platforms. And if you ever have a question for the podcast, especially on my baseball handicapping, how I do things and everything, since this is a newer podcast, feel free to tweet it in at @unit_81. I always love talking at you guys, and I plan to do so once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.